Let me ask you something. When you look at your life, is it something that's just happening to you? Or is it something you're actively, consciously building? Well, that's the huge difference we're going to get into today. The art of intentional living. Seriously, think about this for a second. Are you building a life or just living one? Are you the architect or are you just the tenant? It sounds like a small distinction, but trust me, it changes absolutely everything. So let's dig into what that really means.
You see, for most of us, if we're being honest, the default setting is just living. And that's what we'll call life on autopilot. It's that comfortable, familiar groove we all slip into without even noticing. And it's not our fault, really. Our brains are actually wired to create routines to save energy.
Does this look a little too familiar? The alarm goes off, you grab the phone. Then comes the commute, the workday, and then, that evening blur of dinner and TV. It's a cycle that's so common, we don't even register it as a series of choices anymore. It's just what you do, right? But that efficiency comes at a cost. And then you do it all over again. The days just blend into weeks, the weeks into months, and then one day you kind of look up and think, wait, where'd the last year go? That feeling, that sense of being stuck on a loop, that's the hallmark of a life on autopilot. And this really gets to the heart of the problem. We become passengers. We're not steering the ship, we're just letting the current of our habits carry us along, with no real destination in sight. It's a totally passive way to live. So if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, what's the alternative to being a passenger? It's becoming the pilot. And that brings us to the intentional alternative, where we stop passively drifting and start actively designing our life. So what even is intentional living? Well, to put it simply, it's about switching from default mode to design mode. It means that the choices you make, whether they're big or small, are based on your values, not just on old habits or what you think other people expect from you. This chart really spells it out, doesn't it? A life on autopilot feels reactive, like you're constantly putting out little fires all day long. But an intentional life is proactive. You're building things in a way that prevents the fires in the first place. And look at your energy. It goes from being drained and scattered to being focused and aligned. Okay, this all sounds pretty good in theory, right? But how do you actually do it? How do you make this real? That's where we get practical. Let's break down the core principles of how to actually make this happen. Remember that passenger metaphor we talked about? Well, this is a part where you get off the boat and you walk into the architect's office. You are no longer just along for the ride. Nope. You're picking up the blueprints and the tools to start building. And the framework for this is actually pretty simple. It really just boils down to 3 steps. First, you define your values. Think of this as your personal mission statement. Second, you set your priorities based on those values. And third, you act accordingly. That's it. Define, prioritize, act. So step 1 is the foundation. What truly matters to you. Not your boss, not your neighbor, you. If you're not sure where to start, think about a time you felt genuinely happy or fulfilled. What was happening? What value was being honored in that moment? That's your compass. It's the filter for every other decision you're going to make. Now for step 2, and I got to warn you, this one's a bit of a reality check. You can think of it as a personal audit. Ask yourself, do my calendar and my bank account reflect what I say is important to me? If you say health is a top priority, but you haven't made time for a walk in a month, well, there's a disconnect. Where you spend your time and money, that's the honest truth of what you currently prioritize. And that brings us to step 3, act. This is not about some massive overnight life change. Please don't think that. It's all about the small, consistent daily choices.
It's choosing to call a friend because you value connection. It's choosing to read a book instead of scrolling because you value learning. Every tiny action is like casting a vote for the person you want to become. So why bother with all this work? Because the payoff is massive. Let's talk about the incredible rewards that come from making that shift from an autopilot life to a purposeful one. The best part is that all these rewards feed into each other. Living intentionally gives you clarity. That newfound clarity creates a deep, real sense of fulfillment. And that fulfillment brings you peace and, for maybe the first time, a genuine feeling of being in control of your own life. So here's what's actually happening on the inside. You know that feeling of being pulled in a million different directions at once? That's internal conflict. But when your actions finally line up with your values, that conflict just quiets down. And what rushes in to fill that space is a clear, powerful sense of purpose. All right, we've talked about the what, the why, and the how. Now it is time to make this real. Let's move this out of the world of theory and into action with your very first intentional act. Don't worry about tomorrow or next week or next year. Just for today. What is one small thing you can do on purpose today that lines up with one of your values? It could be as simple as putting your phone away during dinner to be truly present. Just one small intentional act. That's all it takes to start. And I'll leave you with this last thought to chew on. You know, a single brick doesn't really look like much, does it? But what happens if you lay one, just one, intentionally every single day? What kind of incredible life could you build for yourself? The choice.
Okay, so picture this. A galaxy, absolutely teeming with life, that's known nothing but peace for thousands of years. Now, imagine it all just vanishes. Gone, overnight, in a storm of violence. And way out on the fringes, completely cut off, is one planet, Earth. Totally oblivious to the fact that civilization is screaming its last breath. Let's get into how this forgotten little world became the galaxy's last and only hope. So, flash forward 6 months after that galactic collapse. This is the moment it all comes to a head. A truly massive fleet, the Girothair Imperium, just appears in Earth's orbit. And they don't do diplomacy. They don't offer terms. They just broadcast this one terrifying message to the entire planet. Kneel or die. You've got 1 hour. I mean, that's a terrifying moment, right? But the real question, the one that matters, is how did we even get to this point? How on earth did a species that the galaxy considered too primitive to even bother with suddenly become the only thing standing in the way of its conquerors? Well, the answer starts 6 months earlier, at the exact moment everything went dark. So let's rewind. We're going to the heart of the old galaxy, to this giant station called the Nexus. Think of it as the capital of everything. Diplomacy, trade, government. It was the symbol of an unbelievable era of peace. And, it was about to become a graveyard. The really stunning thing here is the sheer speed of it all. 4,000 years, 37 different species living in peace. And then the Dramarath show up. No warning, no declaration of war. They just rip the station open. The delegates in the Grand Chamber are cut down right where they stand. 4 millennia of peace, gone. Wiped out in 11 minutes. But in the middle of all that chaos, one man, Ambassador Tran, he doesn't run. He fights his way through the madness, not to save his own skin, but to do one last thing. As a Dravrath soldier looms over him, he says these last defiant words. He wasn't just talking, he was making a promise. So what did he do? Well, on his wrist, Tran had this simple little device. It was a gift from a human friend, a general named Floyd Carpenter. By galactic standards, it was basically junk, unencrypted, just a simple radio pulse. Activating it wasn't a call for help. Who was left to call? No, this was a dead man's switch. It was a silent promise that meant one thing and one thing only. Everything has failed. That little pulse starts beaming across the galaxy, but nobody's there to hear it. And on Earth? Well, of all the rotten luck, a massive solar flare had just knocked out all deep space communications. For 12 solid hours, humanity was completely blind and deaf. When the systems finally flicker back on, some technician spots it, a faint, repeating signal on an old military frequency, coming from the galactic core. That signal gets kicked up the chain pretty fast, right to General Floyd Carpenter. And he doesn't need a team of analysts to tell him what it means. He recognizes it instantly. He's the one who gave that beacon to his friend, Ambassador Tran. He knew that simple pulse meant Tran was dead, the council was gone, and the worst-case scenario had just happened. And Carpenter doesn't hesitate, not for a second. While the Drath are burning their way across the galaxy, he puts Earth on a secret total war footing. He activates the Aegis Ring, this whole network of defense platforms in orbit. He brings Longbow Base on the moon online, readying its ship-killer weapons. And for 6 straight months, humanity builds and trains. They build a fleet for one single brutal purpose: to kill the monsters they know are coming. This quote from Carpenter, it really says it all, doesn't it? This wasn't just about building ships and guns. It was about knowledge. For those 6 months, every listening post we had was aimed at the Dratharath, soaking up their communications, analyzing their tactics, their weapons, their weaknesses. Humanity wasn't just preparing a defense, they were preparing an ambush. Which brings us right back to now. The Dratharath fleet is hanging up there, the hour they gave is up, and they're waiting for the surrender, the begging. They have absolutely no clue what's about to be unleashed. Humanity's silent answer is coming. So, the Dratharath expected what they found everywhere else, a terrified planet ready to roll over. What they got instead was something their entire philosophy of war was totally unprepared for. They got physics, pure, simple, kinetic force delivered at unbelievable speed. Get your head around this number for a second. 17 kilometers per second. That's the speed of one slug from the Aegis Ring's railguns. We're not talking about a laser beam here. This is a solid rod of tungsten the size of a car, moving at nearly 40,000 miles an hour. It's basically a hypervelocity sledgehammer. And that is the result of the opening volley. In the blink of an eye, 14 of the Drathur's lead ships are just shredded. Their fancy energy shields, designed for plasma bolts, they flare up and then just pop, completely useless against a solid object moving that fast. The pure, unfiltered shock on that Drathur command bridge must have been something to see. And this is the why. This is why it worked. The Drathur had powerful energy weapons and shields. Humanity had, well, basically giant space shotguns and thick armor plating. But the real game changer was tactics. The Drathur fought like bullies, all individual power. The humans fought like a wolf pack, a single, coordinated network where every ship knew what every other ship was seeing and doing in real time. But listen, you don't conquer a galaxy by being stupid. The Drathur are shocked, but they adapt. They realize a ship-to-ship fight isn't working, so they pivot to what they do best: brute force and numbers. They launch thousands of boarding pods, trying to turn this into a nasty, close-quarters fight inside our ships. So this is it, humanity's big, desperate gamble. General Carpenter authorizes something called Operation Blackout. One little stealth ship sneaks toward the Drathur flagship, this monster called the Throne of Scales, and drops off a 5-person special ops team. The mission? Get inside, get to the shield generator, and blow it to hell. A total suicide run. And they do it, they pull it off. But it is a brutal, bloody fight all the way to the engineering deck. They plant the charges and take out the generator. But it costs them. Sergeant Dren Kowalski goes down fighting. The team gets out, but the price was paid. The enemy flagship is now a sitting duck. With those shields down, Carpenter gives the final command. All the way from the moon, Longbow Base fires its massive ship-killer rods. The tungsten projectiles cross the void, and with nothing to stop them, they slam into the throne of scales. The command ship is just shattered, and Vorik Dreth, the apex of the Imperium, simply ceases to exist. The destruction of the flagship, it breaks the Drareth. Their command structure is gone. The fleet splinters. The battle is over. Earth is saved. But as the quiet returns to the solar system, the horrifying cost of that survival starts to become clear. This was not some clean, heroic triumph. Not at all. 14 human ships were completely destroyed. Over 3,000 people were killed, many in those horrible close-quarters battles inside the ships. The destroyer Relentless was lost with every single person on board. Humanity survived? Yeah, but it was wounded, and badly. And then, sifting through the wreckage of the flagship, salvage crews find it. Ambassador Tran's beacon. The Drakarath had taken it off his body like a trophy, some meaningless piece of junk. They had been carrying the very instrument of their own doom with them the whole time, and they never, ever knew it. So, as the outer colonies finally managed to get a signal through, desperate to know what happened, Carpenter gives them this. No victory speeches, no celebrations. Just a cold, hard summary of the facts. They won the battle. But the war had just begun. And that's really the question that hangs over everything, isn't it? Humanity proved they could fight back. They proved they could win. But the force that crushed an entire galaxy is still out there. This was just their vanguard. What happens when the full might of the Imperium turns its eyes toward Earth? They survived the day, for sure, but their future in this new, hostile galaxy is anything but certain.